Hello, I am Mudita, and welcome back to Satisfactory. In the last video, I automated fused modular frames, radio control units, supercomputers, and turbo motors. That is the large majority of new parts for this phase being sent to my dimensional depots. Now I can build as many Mark III miners as I want. It's time to start working on the space elevator parts. I'm going to continue to keep things relatively small in scale, until next phase anyways. Today's main project is going to be automated 1 nuclear pasta per minute. As it turns out, I am not done with this area yet. The new factory is going to be located right over here. But before I start working on that, it's time to take care of another little side project. Here we are inside the train station that's right next to my aluminum factory. And if we take a look at my sinks, I've still got quite a bit available. Still got 600 ingots on here. 600, that's probably 750. Yeah, I think that's 750. 375 and 260. I still have quite a few materials to work with over here. I bring that up because I'm kind of running out of space for the actual train station. Not really, I have tons of space. I could easily expand this out farther. But where it's at right now, I feel like is a really good spot to cut it off and just not have it take over this little outcropping of rocks here. Which means I can fit one more train station, but I still have a ton of materials and one train station just isn't going to do it. I still want to be able to get good use out of everything in here. But I think it's time for my train station to grow. And this will be my first 2-story train station. I did have an idea that this was a possibility. So the way I built this roof was so that it was 2 foundations tall, and that way I could put these frame foundations here on the lower level to add some extra support and give it a fun look. But I've gotten used to being able to see through it, and I don't want to just close off this entire thing. So I'm going to use glass frame foundations for this floor. Now, part of me doesn't like it because putting the train stations on top of glass foundations just doesn't make any sense to me. But it's also a science fiction video game. And this must be some really strong glass. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. The whole roof is now covered in glass. And the first train station to go up here is my own. To me, it makes sense to put this one up here because this is the one that's going to get the least used, which opens up a free spot for here. And then I still have that extra train station that I haven't quite used yet. Even though it's not completely done, it could use a little bit more dressing up. And I'm still missing a huge section of wall here. Made some good progress on this train station so it doesn't look just so bare bones now. But for all the regular trains, nothing has really changed. They just go straight along and head to their appropriate train station. For my train, however, it's going to come up here. Now this is the one spot that got a little bit weird because I used 4-meter foundations and I just didn't really feel like changing it. Because I really like having these frame ramp foundations right here, and there's only one size of those. They only match the 4-meter. So it does look a little bit weird, and it's pretty obvious that I just kind of added it on. Once I have all of the train stations in here, I can do a little bit more work and hopefully hide the fact that I just kind of slapped on the second layer. So far, it's just my train station. They will exit this way because I needed plenty of room to be able to go back down. And then it just runs alongside. So I decided to keep them as 2 separate tracks all the way up until they merge onto the main rail. Because it's kind of like adding to a really long manifold already. If I were to add these to the end or even here in the middle, I feel like it would just create unnecessary traffic. Hopefully this way lets things flow a little bit easier. Right now, since it's only my train station at the top, it really makes no difference. But eventually I'm going to use a whole bunch of that aluminum and I'm probably going to want to ship it out somewhere. What used to be my personal train station has now been renamed. I really hate that they shake my screen even though I'm flying. Why does it do that? So as you can probably guess, it's going back to that home factory where my hub's at. I'm finally going to automate my turbo rifle ammo. I've had the machines in place because I knew if I didn't do it, then I would just put it off until later, and then honestly that later would just never come. So I made sure that I included it in my plans. I already have a lot of the infrastructure already set up for this. The two recipes are essentially exactly the same. It's just this one is slightly more wasteful because you're using packages and you don't get those back. But you get to use a manufacturer instead of a blender. And because I already have this packaged in that factory, it just makes sense to split off what I need for this project and then just not worry about it. I won't be making 250 per minute. I'm actually going to be making 50, which means that I'm going to need 25 rifle ammo, 3 casings. That is all I need from this factory, 3 casings. But when I designed and built my home hub factory, I didn't realize that I was going to be doing the copper ingots here, and I could have just shipped out just the casing. So I already have the copper ingots and the machine ready to make the casings over at that hub factory. All I need is 4 aluminum ingots. The only minor hiccup is there's only one free freight platform available at that factory. And that's at the 3rd spot, which would be like all the way out here. I just need to do a little reshuffling of these sinks. Probably gonna have to put one of them over here. So let me rearrange things and then we can get to the load balancing for the aluminum. And there we go. Just needed to move one of the sinks to the side here, and then the other one is a little bit farther up to the front. But it has enough room. I just need this one freight platform for a whopping 4 aluminum ingots per minute. Here are my 3 lines of aluminum ingots for me to work with. I can go with 375, 600, or 260. Siphoning off 4 from any of these isn't really going to be the smallest thing anyways, so let's go ahead and just work with the 260, because that'll also just leave me with a fun number to work with in the future. Here's the diagram I came up with to take care of this. As you can see, it's not exactly small, and it is going to take up a decent amount of space. And since most of this is going to be just in a straight line coming right off of that splitter, I could do a number of different things to get this built out of the way so that it would make it easier to build this whole thing. Or I could come up to my huge new roof. It's nice and flat and has plenty of space for a Mark II blueprinter. And this is going to have just enough space. And the reason I know that is I space things out the same pretty much every time. The way I space these out is I give them 1 meter. Each merger and splitter are 4 meters by themselves, and if I'm going to give it 1 extra meter before I place the next one, I can just say that each merger and splitter is 5 meters in length. Looking at my diagram, I can just count up in a row. There's a total of 8 mergers and splitters in a line, times 5 is my 40 meters. And that just so happens to fit right in here. We'll start with a merger, and then it's going to be 3 splitters in a row. And then 5-way split time, so a merger and 2 splitters. And then 1 last merger to bring it all together. And then we can work our way backwards on the right hand side. We just go back to the 2nd splitter, place a merger there. We skip the merger, put it next to this splitter, and all the splitters. And there's the layout. I just need a few belts. 260 will be plugging into the merger, which means once we loop back part of it, we're going to have 270 on here. Splitting that 3 ways, we've got 90, 90, and to get the last 90 out of here, I'm just going to use old stubby, and I'm going to do that on both of these, as you can see on the diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and place them all now. So the first 2 are 90 each. Mark II belt there. With this 90, we're doing that again, so we're splitting it 3 ways, so there's 30, there's 30, and then the last 30 is coming by the lift. There we go. This right here is going to be 180, here's 240. This 30 is also going to get split 3 ways. There's 10, there's 10, and this 10 is going to be the 10 that loops back to the initial merger to make all of this work. And now we just have this last part. Now that we're down to 10 into this merger, we can do a 5-way split and get my 4. That 10 will become 12 after we loop back 1/5, which means this will be 6 and this will be 6. Here's 2, there's 4, and then here's the part that we loop back to make it work. And now we just need to connect these last belts. So here is 250, plus the 6. Right here is 256, and I forgot that I needed to do that part. So now what I'm going to do is just rebuild this, but with this whole line just 1 meter to the side, and then it won't run into that. And now that I have the blueprint, this becomes really easy to replace. I just need my ridiculous 260 into 256 and 4 blueprint. Good, we still have plenty of space. By like 2 meters. Alright, so we might as well just place this probably right there. And then obviously we're going to replace this lift. And then this lift hole right here is where the 4 is going to go. So thankfully it's not very many and I've got plenty of time to do it. Let's go ahead and just place this here. We'll erase this belt and this lift. And then out of here is the 256. And then for the 4, this is going to go here. I think I will move this belt just to the side a little bit so that I can squeeze in just the small storage. Because I'm moving so few per minute, the belt is actually probably enough of a buffer. But that just seems like a bad idea. So I am going to go ahead and just use a storage container like normal. If I flip the merger around, I can have it output this way. And then I'm going to want this to be in line with the output here. Will this all fit? Yeah, I think it will. Okay. So this is just gonna have to get moved. Bean, what are you doing? Alright, so let's flip this one around. Gotta reconnect both of these. So there's our 4. Drop off all the ones that I've collected. Give it a little head start. Perfect. Man, I love the throughput monitors. They're just such a great way to make sure that I actually did things the way I thought I did. That's 4 aluminum ingots being loaded onto the train. Now I'm going to head back to my home factory and I'll show you how I do the load balancing for the unload side. Welcome back home. In the basement where we've got the train stations. And I just did not give myself a lot of room here. This is the one train station that actually has freight platforms. I'm already using the first 2 for the iron and the copper. But I did build a third one, knowing that eventually I was going to need those aluminum ingots. The whopping 4 aluminum ingots are going to come in right here. I'm going to do the same thing I did with these ones, where I just have a wall hole. And then it's going to continue this pattern so that any of the incoming trains get to go just right under all the conveyor belts. Logically, it would fit right here, because that would be kind of the straightest shot. However, I don't think this is quite enough space. Here's the diagram. It's not too involved, and I could probably push these belts back a little bit farther, and I could probably make it work. Or I've just got tons of space all the way over here. So the belt will come in over here, and then I'll just run it all the way over to here. Sure, it'll take a little bit longer to start up because I'm dealing with such low numbers, but I'm in no rush. Since I'm dealing with such low numbers, I only need the small storage container. It does mean I'm going to use a priority merger just to make sure that I can keep things flowing, but really, I don't need it. So following the diagram, I'll go splitter, merger, splitter, and I guess this is where I'm going to improvise, and we're going to go sideways. With the lowest speed belt being 60 per minute, and I'm trying to get down to 4. That's the same ratio as taking 15 down to 1. So from here, I just need a couple mergers. We just need one here. We skip next to this one, and then we've got one here. All right, so that's 60. And if we split that 3 ways, we've got 20, 20, and then we're gonna do old stubby to get it over here. And unfortunately, that would clip through there, and I'm not crazy about that. Now, thankfully, these are going in a straight line, so what I can do is just nudge it over by 1 meter. And now, as long as I connect it to this top one first, and then go down to the bottom one, it'll get rid of the accordion, but it does bring it in that 1 meter, and now I don't have any clipping. I can delete this one, On this side, I can just do it like normal. And then just connect them in a straight line. Now with this 20, we're just going to do a 5-way split. 20 will become 24. Split that in half. We've got 12 and 12. Now I just need to use all 3 outputs of this one. One of them needs to get looped back to the merger. One of them is going to get looped back over to this merger to get cycled back to the very beginning. Like with all of these. And then just to make sure there's no backing up, I'll use a Mark II. And we'll set the priority of the part that's looping back as the highest priority. And now I'm left with 4 out of this one. So now I've just got to figure out where exactly it's going to fit. And then we just need to go up a few floors. So up through this floor. This is where we're doing the turbo fuel. And I'm going to have to come back down here and do a little bit of load balancing to get that. And then if we come up to this floor, we see a couple red machines. The assembler here is going to be making my alclad casings. And instead of 112.5, I need 3. I've already got the 2 copper ingots ready. I just need to delete that belt and plug it into here. These casings are going to lead on over to the manufacturer, which I can now finally set the recipe for. Turbo rifle ammo and 50 per minute. The 25 rifle ammo is going to be pretty easy because if I follow this belt right here, around here and under these machines, all I need to do is connect this belt to that lift, because currently this machine right here is outputting 75 rifle ammo per minute. It's going into a splitter. And currently it's just being split and then re-merged together and pretty much all going into a sink. But once I connect that belt to that lift, it'll start siphoning off the 25 per minute I need. I went ahead and did the load balancing for the turbo fuel. And I decided to skip over recording it mainly because there's so much going on right here that it was just really confusing to differentiate these versus the load balancing that I was doing it right on top of. Because I kind of ran out of space. So all of this load balancing is just 2 meters above all of these existing belts. So I've done this in a bunch of places, but the easiest thing when you kind of run out of space but you don't mind stacking it like this, just lay down some temporary foundations and you're just going to clip them over those belts that are just working. And then you can build the next layer of whatever you're trying to do. And then you can just delete the foundations and it gets a little bit easier to start stacking things. But if you make things too compact, then it can be kind of impossible to even diagnose what's going wrong if something does go wrong. The load balancing wasn't too bad even though it looks like a lot. Each one of these packagers is outputting 40 packaged turbo fuel per minute. So I'm just working with 40 of it. As you can see, here's the diagram, and here's what the final product looks like. So now I have a whopping 3 packaged turbo fuel per minute headed on up to the next floor. So let's go ahead and get this ammo started. I may or may not have forgotten to start my train at the appropriate time. So starting this took a little bit longer than it should have. But it's up and running now. And I am about to get the first batch of turbo rifle ammo out. There it is. I'm excited to give this a solid try. I usually kind of ignore it and go with the homing rifle ammo, but it's got to be just a nice upgrade over the regular rifle ammo. I just got to get used to how it fires just a little bit differently. Been running for 2 minutes. I've got 100 in here now. Let's switch to the new stuff. But when they can't fight back, this is pretty great. I jumped on my train and headed back out here. Now we can test out the new rifle ammo and the new jetpack fuel a little bit. So now that I've got some rocket fuel, oh, this is nice. It still burns a little bit faster than I'd like, but I guess that's what the ionize is for. For this project, I'm going to be using 2 of the iron nodes because I need a decent amount. And then just right over here, there's a copper node. Get over here. The nice thing about this is my aim is already bad, and so now I just have a built-in excuse. These have the most annoying hitbox though. Oh, you want some too. So far so good with the turbo rifle ammo. I like it. So that's the iron, here's the copper. The aluminum casings and the nitrogen gas are coming from the train station. Radio control units are coming from there. There's one last resource I need. Alright, so the factory is going to get placed right here. The ore is just at the bottom of this little cliff right here. And then if we look at the other direction, it's a big guy for just a blue slug. Well, that's what the new ammo is for. Oh. Or maybe he's gone. But just above that is a limestone node, and so that is where the 216 limestone that I need is going to come from. So the rapid fire against the big guys is pretty nice once you get it up to speed. It's a good thing I've got all this ammo. Having so much ammo in each magazine is so nice instead of having to reload so often. Just a quick 20 hog remains and 8 splitters. Cool. Now that I've cleared out the creatures, let me get these miners placed. I've got all my miners in place, and the first floor of foundation is laid. And then I realized I think I went slightly out of order, and I went over all of the things that I was going to need, but I don't think I've shown you the plan yet. Here's my spreadsheet for this factory. I'm going to be making a whopping 1 nuclear pasta per minute, and because I'm going to be making fused modular frames to create those, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple extra that I can use for one of the other space elevator parts. So in total, all of this is to create 1 nuclear pasta and 2 fused modular frames per minute. And if you're curious what these dividing lines are between the different rows, that is how I'm going to separate each floor. And it has much more to do with the amount of machines than the amount of recipes. As you can see, I'm getting good use out of a bunch of the different alternate recipes. A big one is the copper alloy ingot. It's not the most efficient as far as copper ore is concerned, but the big advantage to the copper alloy ingot is that I need so few machines. Even with power shards, I would need at a minimum 13 refineries if I wanted to use the pure copper ingot recipe. Instead, with this alt, I do need 600 iron ore, but I only need 6 foundries, which are already much smaller, and I need less than half the amount. For me, it's a fantastic trade-off because I don't see myself running out of iron anytime soon. I've got the copper and the 2 iron miners in place, and my 1 limestone. Now it's finally time to build this factory. I want these 2 factories to be similar, but I don't want them to look exactly the same. So I am going to use the coated concrete a lot with this one, and use the really dark black. But instead of gold, I'll be using the light blue. It's mainly going to be the blue from this swatch, and what I like to do is if there's a color that's already pre-made that I really like, I just go in here and then I just save it. And then that way, when I come to my custom swatch, because maybe I want the primary color to be black, but then the secondary color, because every once in a while, this does make a difference. I can come down here, and now I just have a bunch of the swatches already saved. So I can do the swatch for blue, and now I can make sure that this color will match anything that I just paint with the normal swatch for blue. It just helps keep the colors a little bit more consistent. Originally my thinking was maybe I would add some patterns around to the outside, and you can see this is where the secondary color really makes a big difference with foundations. But I'm not sure it's going to fit in the long run. That's way down the line when we get to the decorating phase. So just like the turbo motor factory, I really liked it, so I'm going to use the full foundation as a walkway all the way around, and then the part that's lower is where all the machines are going to go. Ideally, I'm going to keep all the machines into just this blue area, and then that will give me a little bit of a border to do any of the belt work, but it's also not really a hard rule. It's just what I'm going to try to do. So in total, the factory is, 12 foundations for the bottom floor, so 14 in total, including the walkways, and then 6 or 8 in total with the walkways going that way. So decent size, but not too big. Alright, so facing the train station here, let's start laying out some machines. The way the layout is going to go is I need 6 foundries, so they are going to go in a line right here. These foundries, I need to unlock the recipe for. It's been in here for a while. Well, let's go ahead and get our copper alloy ingot now. There we go. And these are overclocked to 200%. And don't you just love to see these numbers? 100 of each in, 200 out? Doesn't get any better. Obviously, we're going to have to paint it the copper finish. But I also want to make sure that I get my spacing right for everything. Alright, so I'm going to try to keep all the machines within this blue area for no real good reason, other than I think it'll look good. So I'm going to also try to do at least some of the boat work inside of here if I can. So the way this will work is there's going to be 2 splitters here in the middle. And then there's going to be these 6 foundries. So it's going to split in half, and then it's going to do a 3-way split, and then that'll do a 3-way split. And then from here, I'm going to gather 3 of them together. Since each one is outputting 200, 3 foundries together would be 600. And then from here, we've got a constructor. With this constructor, we'll pick the copper powder. We will overclock it to 200%. That'll intake 600 copper ingots and output 100 copper powder. What a ratio. And then with that, I'll be able to merge it. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to find the endpoint here so that I could kind of work backwards. And yeah, actually this looks pretty good. So there's going to be 2 of these setups. That looks good. We'll just do Mark II into those. All right, so actually I think I guessed pretty close. Oh, off by just a meter. All right, so that one is going to go there. These are all outputting 200. So let's get Mark III into all of these. And then just the Mark V into the constructor. Just mirror it on this side as well. Just enough space. Fits like a glove. Oh, but I spoke too soon. This is the part that I needed to test out. Alright, I think I actually need to move these up by like a meter. Just because I know it will fit. This is the reason I'm going to do it. Yeah, it's still plenty of space. Okay, and the reason for it is I want these splitters in that spot right there. So that one goes there, that one goes there. So you'll see, here's the difference. Them being 1 meter apart. If I do it this way, I can still get it to work, and I could do it either way. I could either clip the accordion into the machine, or if I start with the machine, I could have it clip into the splitter. Now, the problem with doing that is if I were to do it that way, and then I go to the next one, because that accordion is clipped into here, now this won't be able to make that 90-degree turn. So what I would have to do is go from here and then into the machine. But then that also means that I basically need to do the same thing for all of these ones, which would be fine, and it would look fine. Or I could just move these machines back 1 meter, and now it should all line up just the way I hope it does. Because if I do that, and then if I do the same thing on this side, well, if straight mode would cooperate more often, it would have worked. There we go. Okay. So yeah, I like that spacing a little bit better. So I'm just going to move those back by a meter. And these all need to be Mark II because it's 100 into every machine. So it means the belts need to be Mark II. Terrific. And then the bottom one is nice and easy. This one we can just use straight mode for. And then that means both of these are going to be 300. And just like that, you've got a nice compact little setup that'll take 600 copper and iron ore and turn it into 200 copper powder. I've got a tiny bit of room left over, so let's squeeze in one last recipe. For the limestone, I need 2 constructors, and I am going to try to do this just really compact if I can. I think if I line this up right on the middle, I can get this whole thing to fit in a little 2x2 area. Alright, so the very initial splitter is going here. Set the recipe real quick. I need 72 concrete across 2 machines, so 36 for each one. Which means they need 108 limestone, Mark II into both of those. And then I just want a merger right here. And then I can use just Mark 1s on this side. Terrific, nice and compact. Which gives me just enough space to do the little bit of load balancing I need to do right here. Because for the concrete, I need this to go to 2 places. 50 is going to go on to make my encased industrial pipes. 22 of it is going to go 1 more floor above that one. and it's going to get used in my heavy encased frame alternate recipe. And I'm actually kind of surprised this hasn't happened sooner, but when I was prepping for this factory and crunching some numbers, I laid out my diagram. And then when I went to save it, I realized I already had one with the exact same name. So I saved this one as a version 2, and here you go. Here are the two diagrams of the exact same ratio split done in completely different ways. The nice thing is this gives me some options. Depending on how much space I have to work with, one may just fit better than the other. They're both going to accomplish the same thing. Even though I made a new one, I'm actually going to go with the original one I designed because it'll fit in this space just a little bit easier. So I did reduce this by dividing everything by 2. So instead of 72 concrete, we've got 36 as the very first number. Let's go ahead and start here with a splitter. And then this is where I'm going to change things just a little bit. Instead of having this splitter up here, I'm actually going to save myself a little bit more space and put it right here. Which still means the second splitter is going to be the next one up here. And then we've got a third splitter. And now we just need a couple mergers. So this merger, it just needs to be lined up with both of those. And then I need 2 more on this side. This one needs to be facing the left. And this one needs to be facing straight towards that one. And that's all the splitters and mergers I need. So if we multiply all the numbers by 2, this one is 72. We split that 3 ways and we've got 24 on each one. So 24, 24, 24. With this 24, we just need to split it a few more times. So we split it in half. There's 12 and 12. 6 and 6. And with this 6, we split it all 3 ways. So here is 2, there's 2, and there's 2. Because this one had 6 and 12, here is 18. Plus the 2 and the 2. Here is my 22. With this one, both of these are 24. So 48 plus the 2. Here's my 50. Not too shabby. So I'm going to skip building the floor, but might as well show you the first one anyways. What I do from here is I zoop it up 5. The fourth one is going to be the foundation. So I can just zoop this all the way across. And I could probably use a blueprint and make things a little bit faster. But because the factory really isn't that big, this really doesn't take too long. And then this one right here is the one that's going to go up above and create my border. And that gives me my walkway. And we're back. And I didn't change a whole lot, but I did change this very middle section. So as you can see, this is a 2-meter foundation now instead of the 4-meter. And I'm hoping it gives me just a little bit more space to maybe add a little bit of lighting. Because I so rarely do that in my factories, and it doesn't really take a lot. Unfortunately, the ceiling lights aren't really my favorite thing. They just kind of create these weird cones of light, and in some places you can make them look great. As a broad use throughout the factory, I think it's a little bit harder to use and still make it look good. So I'll probably just be using the billboards. And if you ever want to place these on foundations like this, because if you normally try to place them, it's going to do it like this, and then you could drop it down because you've got that little pole there. So instead of just normally placing them, hold control and they'll snap to a foundation, and this will work on both the top and the bottom. And I am just so happy that they added an arrow to tell you which way is up. It drove me bonkers placing signs over and over again, and then them being upside down. Now thankfully when you're using it for lighting, it doesn't matter. But if you wanted to put writing on there, it was awful. And thank you so much for that change, Coffee Stain. Sometimes it's just the little things. That little change made using signs just so much easier for me. But that's the decorating phase, so we'll get to that later. We've got a few more machines to place. This floor is only going to be dealing with one recipe, and that's because I need 8 smelters for all of my iron ingots. Alright, so this is 10 foundations wide, so let's find the middle. Here we go. Alright, so this is the center line, and I need 8, so we'll just make sure that these are nice and spaced out. Let's put this right there in the middle. And that leaves me with an extra foundation on either side. I do like my symmetry. Thankfully, load balancing powers of 2s and 3s just doesn't get a whole lot easier. So we just gonna have to stack them all like this. And then there we go. Should probably set the recipe. Load it up with power shards. So in total, we've got 576 across 8 machines, 72 for each one. If we take a look at my spreadsheet, I need these iron ingots to go to a number of different places. I actually need to split this up 4 different ways. I've got iron pipes, iron plates, cast screws, and iron rods to make, all in different quantities. Mark 2 going into the machine, which means Mark 3 for this one. That one needs to be Mark 4. There we go. And then we'll plug in the 576 iron ore into there, and then it'll all get smelted. Now, I could do the exact same thing and group it all together. And then I would have my 576 ingots, and I could load balance them, well, probably on the next floor because I don't have a ton of room here. If I were to group it all together, I need to split these to go to 4 different recipes, all in different quantities, because of course they are. Oh, I forgot to grab more power shards. And this is a good building tip for you. Normally, I like to place one machine, I set the recipe, and then I copy it. And the beauty of doing that is if you need power shards in there, it'll pull from your dimensional depot. However, what I did is place all of the smelters first, and then I set one, I copied it, and I got some of them power shards. But eventually, then I just ran out, and then these ones just don't have any. Because when you're just copying and pasting the recipes, that isn't going to pull more power shards out of your dimensional depot. So keep that in mind if you ever find out that you're just missing power shards in machines that you swore you would have put them in. It's a good possibility that that's what happened. Thankfully, each of these machines is outputting 72 iron ingots, which is a manageable number. Because they have a convenient number, I don't need to group them all together and then resplit it all up. Behold, another diagram. Like I said, each smelter is outputting 72, which is a really nice and convenient number to work with. You split it in half and it's 36. You split it 3 ways and you've got 24. It's great. Making the load balancing for all of this, relatively easy once you lay it out. So let's start here on the left and we'll work our way to the right. So because I want the very last thing to be right at the edge, we're going to put the merger there and then we'll switch to the splitter and that can go right there. And as you can see on the diagram, that's the most amount of mergers and splitters I need to go. So this is pretty convenient. So this merger will go right here. And then we're going to skip these 2. This one will go here. And then we come to the second to last. We've got one more merger here and a splitter in front of this one. And then there's one more merger and we're going to stick it in the middle of those 2. So right there. All right, so first thing is we've got 72 coming out of all of these smelters. So let's go ahead and just do that first. And over here, we're just splitting it in half. So 36 goes this way. So here I've got my 36, which is what I need for screws. 36 plus 72 is 108. And that's what I need for my iron plates. 72 times 3 is 216. So we can throw that in there. And then on this side, we are going to split this 72 all 3 ways. So we've got 24 and 24. So here is the 48 I need for iron rods. And then with that last 24 coming over to here, plus 72 and 72, I've got 168. And so out of here, I've got 384, which is the amount I need for my iron pipes. I'll be honest, I thought this floor was going to be way more of a nightmare. Thankfully, with these recipes, all the numbers worked out really conveniently. Let's move on to the next floor. I cleaned up those temporary belts and added some signs because they're really useful, especially for this next part. Because now I'm going to take these amounts and throw them into those recipes that I was talking about. Up here is going to be all the constructors that are going to take those iron ingots and turn them into the other parts that I need. I've got 4 recipes and they each need 2 constructors. So I think I'm just going to do basically what I did with the smelters and just have 1 free foundation on either side. And since I need 4 different recipes, it just makes sense to place them all. I just need a splitter right in front of all of these. But to know which build speed I need, I should probably set some recipes. This is going to be the main difference between these 2 towers. With that one, I used that part that stuck out as kind of like my lift elevator to bring all of the parts up and down. I definitely could have done the same thing over here if I wanted to, but with this one, I kind of wanted to keep it as a smaller, just straight up rectangle for some reason. And because there were going to be parts like this where I was going to have 4 different belts of all iron, I think it'll be a little bit easier if I'm able to just do this essentially and just have everything come up from the floor below, just kind of right below it. And you know, that's probably not a good spot. It's probably going to have to be farther out so that I have a little bit of room to work with. Is going to be my guess. I'll find a good spot, and then that way I can just run the parts straight in. So now I just have to kind of figure out which one goes where. So 36 is going to go to these first two, which is going to be my cast screws. And for these, I need 144 across two machines, 72 for each one. Take my power assurance back, copy and paste. And now we move on to the next two, which would be 108, which will be making my iron plates. 72 across two machines, 36. And that one's going to be a Mark II. On to the third one, which is the 384. That'll be my iron pipes, 96 pipes across two, 48 on each one. Each machine will intake 192 ingots, so we'll get Mark III into both of those. Last but not least, 48 ingots. It's the good old default iron rod recipe. Each one's going to make 24. I may end up changing where the belts are depending on how I can get these to line up better here. But let's just keep moving up and let's work on the next floor. And now we can move on to the fourth floor. We take a look at the spreadsheet. This floor is going to be dealing with the majority of the assemblers. 4 in total across 3 recipes. Since I only need 4 assemblers and they're not that big, I think I might be able to shrink this floor and the next one's going up. So let's go ahead and line these up. Let's give myself one foundation in the front and the back and give each machine just enough space. And these ones are facing this way because the outputs for all of these machines are facing this way. I should be able to run most of the material up pretty easily. And let's see, to keep things even, I guess this is where it's going to get cut off. And then it's going to cut across there. Alright, so I think I'm going to cut this away, and we're just going to make this section of the tower a little bit smaller. The next floors don't need a ton of machines either, so I think I'll be able to get away with making it a little bit smaller. And that way I get to change the shape, and it's not just one solid rectangle all the way up. Alright, let's set some recipes. I have 3 recipes across these 4 machines, so the 2 that are in the middle are going to be the same. And these are going to be making my modular frames. I need 8 in total, so each one will make 4. Just going to stack 2 splitters here in the middle. Alright, so I pushed all the assemblers back by 1 meter, and it'll make things line up just a little bit nicer. Then I just need these splitters to be moved out just 1 more meter. Yeah, that'll fit. Since I need to squish these into the machine, I need to snap it to the belt first, and then spin it around. And it just won't have the little accordion, but that's okay. And I'm just going to replace these belts. And then the bottom one can go to the outside. The iron rods are going to be coming from the floor below. The reinforced iron plates are actually going to be made up here. And I'm going to do this machine. I'll be using the default recipe for these. And I need 12 in total. And with these, I'm just going to snake it right in between the 2 machines. And since the iron rods are going to come from right below, I can probably have those just plug right in. So I'm going to go over to my blueprints, go down to old Stubby here, and cycle through until I find the right one. There we go. This, I just need to be right on the edge of the foundation, line them both up. I should be able to plug in straight there, and then in default mode, that'll connect there. Alright, so this one just needs the iron plates and the screws, which if we go to the floor below, we've got screws and iron plates. So that'll be easy to belt right up. The last machine here will be doing the encased industrial pipes. And with this one, I can just completely fully overclock it because I need 10. So we'll need the 50 concrete from the first floor, and then 60 steel pipes from below. Hold for a second while I add the next floor. The factory grows just a little bit taller. Looking at the spreadsheet for this floor, there shouldn't be any problem with keeping it this size. I need 1 assembler, 1 manufacturer, 1 blender. So since this is 7 foundations, I think I can make this kind of even. So we'll put the assembler right here in the middle, and then the manufacturer is going to go to the right of it. And we'll just center it on these 3 foundations. And then we can switch to the blender, and we'll center this one on these 3 foundations. The manufacturer will be using the heavy encased frame alternate recipe. Just 1 power shard because I need this to make 3. And now all of a sudden, you get just nice even numbers. And if you're ever curious how I get such even numbers with all of mine, it's because when I look at the recipes, I make sure that if I'm using this alternate, I'm always going to make it in multiples of 3. And then I'm always going to get even multiples of all of these numbers for the inputs. And then the blender is going to be using the Fused Modular Frame recipe. This one's going to be overclocked to 200% so that I can take all 3 of those heavy modular frames and turn them all into fused modular frames. Just need the casing and the gas from the train station, but that's right over here. And then we go into the assembler, which will be making my pressure conversion cube. Just one. Let's do the real basic belt work that's going to be on this floor. So if we take the output of this one, and then because this machine is outputting 3, but I only need one of them to go over here, I'm going to go ahead and place a splitter there. Actually, we might be able to scoot that in. So the 3 will plug into that splitter, 1 gets branched off there, and then the other 2 will get grouped up. For now, I'm just going to be syncing them, but later on, they are definitely going to come in handy. For the blender, I just need the heavy modular frames, and I need all of them. So for this one, we're just going to take it all the way around, because why not? Give them a nice long belt so you can see them all. I'm blocking one of those inputs, but I only need one of them. The radio control units are going to be coming from that factory right there. Everything else is being made below, so I'm just going to need some lifts to bring those up. So far, I've been able to keep the same spacing because all of these machines have been pretty much the same size. So they'll all have basically 3 foundations as windows. Up here, though, we need to go a little bit taller. Not quite sure how tall I want to go, but I also don't want to make it too close because one of the coolest parts of the blender is being able to look down inside of it and watching it spin around. Give me just a second while I figure this out, and we'll add the final machine. Gave the machines a paint job, and the final floor is ready for its one and only machine. Well, I guess 2 if you're going to count the sink. I guess we can just knock that out of the way. Let's make sure we have enough space for it. Put this here in the corner. Then the good old particle accelerator. Oh, these things are huge. I love them. They're such a cool machine. Alright, so let's just get that lined up. And yeah, looks good. Good thing I've automated all those parts. These things are expensive. Just one recipe for these. And here's where my power consumption is really going to start to fluctuate. As of right now, it's been pretty much just the trains that would make it fluctuate. Once I start adding these particle accelerators, ooh, we're going to start to see some spikes. Especially when I overclock it, because this is going to be more than double. This will be fun to see what we're using afterwards. But that's why I built that monstrosity. I'm not worried at all yet. The 1 pressure conversion cube's coming from down below, and the 200 copper powder is being made on the very first floor. Because these things are cool, and I'm just going to display it. So instead of having this go directly in here, I'm going to do something really silly. And we're going to have this go on a little tour of the entire floor. Alright, so here's my thinking. Because this is going to be my walkway, it would be nice if the container was just nice and close so it's easier to grab. I don't want to get in the way of any of that, so we'll put the container right here. And then obviously we've got to put a smart splitter in here. So we'll connect the belt and into the container. And we'll set it up so the overflow goes to the right. And then from here, I'm going to add a merger. So the overflow for this will go into here. And then somewhere over here is probably going to go a floor hole. And that's where I'll bring up the 2 fused modular frames. And they're going to plug into this merger. So that all of them can then go over and into the sink. I could probably make that look a little bit better. But there's the tower. That's all the machines I need to create 1 nuclear pasta and 2 fused modular frames per minute. This is the first factory in a while that I don't need to mess with trains. Everything's coming from nearby, which is really nice and really weird for a late game part. But that's also because I cheated and I made the 2 radio control units already. So that does help. And we're back. I know it doesn't look like a whole lot has changed, but there are a few lifts. And it took me a little while to get everything sorted out. Up here, really nothing much changed. I just decided to have some fun with the curve belt mode to show off the last little bit. Got all the belts and pipes laid on this floor, and that looks pretty good. And then we have the assembler floor where it gets a little bit more hectic. So to make everything neat up there, I needed to make sure that everything kind of got sorted out on this floor, but really it wasn't too bad. Since I had all the extra space, just kind of take things on a journey around the outside, and it lets me see all the parts moving around. On the constructor floor, I'm going to make sure that I get the throughputs added on the other floors up above, but I'm going to try to put it on most of the spots where they're most relevant. For each set of constructor, they need a different amount of ingots, so I thought it would be easiest to put the throughput monitors here, even though downstairs is where it's actually getting balanced. But I was able to keep all of the lifts inside of the blue area, and so I decided to just do that, which meant some of these, like this one and this one, have a spot for a throughput monitor. But this one plugs straight into the merger. I'm crossing my fingers that one day we get throughput monitors for lifts, but I don't want to sound ungrateful. They just got implemented and I love them. I just hope that we get a second version that can go on lifts. And then down here on the bottom floor, I just forgot one belt, but this needs to plug into there. And this is where all of the copper powder is just going to run all the way up to the top floor. And then as far as the nitrogen pipe, that is coming all the way down here, and haven't quite figured that out. I actually think I'm not going to have those go all the way down here. The aluminum casings and the nitrogen are probably going to get plugged in on this floor, because this level is going to be a lot easier to work with, because I can probably just get them to come all the way out to here. It doesn't even need to go that far. So somewhere out to here, and then I'm going to have to get up and over this hill, take out probably just one of these trees. But it shouldn't be too bad getting both the nitrogen and the aluminum casings into the factory. This was honestly something that I wanted in the game for so long, and I love them so much. Especially because of how easy it makes to be able to cheat it through a foundation. Since when has this been the intro? Have I just been missing all the birds this whole time? Normally, I'm not a big fan of clipping belts through anything, especially each other. I don't ever want to see two belts clipping through each other. It just looks weird to me. If you're okay with it, I'm sure it makes building a whole lot easier. But for whatever reason, I'm totally okay with cheating this. And if you want to do this, it's really easy. All you need to do is grab a wall, and you place it on either side. Grab your wall hole, place it in whatever spot you want to use it. And now you can just delete your walls. And then you just want to make sure that you connect the belt first, and then you can replace the foundation. And it works the exact same way with pipes. Okay, so the next step is going to be plugging things into these spots right here. So I need to bring the 2 iron nodes and the copper node. And then, well, now that I'm thinking about it, I need to add one more wall hole, and I'll probably just add it on top. I'll have to play around with it for a little bit, because I also need to bring the 2 radio control units from that factory. If we come inside this factory, thankfully it's going to be really easy, because as we can see, I've got 4 radio control units right now. All I'm going to need to do is slap down a splitter. I don't want it to clip through my walkway here, so I'm going to delete this and replace it so the lift connects straight to it. But then from here, I'm just going to have to figure out which one of these spots can make it all the way down, and then I'll just run a belt over to there. But thankfully, it's just one splitter and a couple lifts and belts. Let me knock this out, and I'll show you what it looks like. The new belt highways are in place. Since this factory is right next to that one, I wanted to keep the theme the same, so I made a smaller version of the blueprint. Instead of 2 foundations, this one's only 1 foundation wide. So the 3 belts carrying the ore are on the bottom, and then the one on top will be the radio control units. We can just follow these down here. So the copper is just coming from right over there. We've got the 2 iron nodes here. And then somehow I found a spot for those radio control units to go all the way down just in one straight line. Once they get ramped up to the appropriate height, then I just needed to curve them into the factory. And I wanted to take advantage of the good old curve mode because it just looks so good. And that brings in the iron, the copper, and the radio control units. The other one I built is up here. I just needed the 1 pillar here, and then 1 pillar here. And then, like I said, I needed to change the elevation just a little bit. And I already turned on the aluminum casing. I'll show you, but it was pretty easy. Oh, see, now I've just got the 1 bird. Thankfully, this factory uses very little nitrogen gas. I only need 75, and each one of these resource well extractors is outputting 300. So it's a bit overkill, but that's okay. The aluminum casings are coming from right over here. I only needed one assembler, overclocked just a little bit to get my 150, which needs 200 aluminum ingots, 100 copper ingots. Nice round numbers. And those are both coming from up here. For the aluminum, I had a whole bunch of choices how to get my 200. But this right here is a 600 belt, so it was just too easy to split off 200 from there. The 100, I needed a little bit more space, and so I added some more glass foundation so I could still see the chaos of this load balancing down below. But this right here is a 750 line, so 250 on each one of these. So with this 250 comes up here. I do a 5-way split, which would give me 50 for each of those fifths. Combine two of them, I've got my line of 100. And the rest of it goes on to be sunk. So thankfully not too complicated, and then the aluminum casings just leave the train station, head down here. And for now, right into the sink. This will be the last thing I send into the factory, so when I go to start this up, I just need to delete this. But the machine that needs the aluminum casings needs a whole bunch of other things to get made first, so I'm not going to send these in until that one's ready for it. I almost forgot. There is one more belt that I needed to bring in, and that's the limestone. So that's coming from right over here. I just went right under the train line, and then we're coming up. And I've just got a lift. And then I needed to blow up a rock to access this little tunnel here. But once I did it, I figured, I've got to use it, right? So the limestone just snakes through there. And then it's coming from the miner. So I had a little bit of a journey to go, but it really wasn't too bad. The last major piece is getting power to everything, and then it's obviously the decorating phase. Thankfully the factory isn't too big, so I can't really spend that much time on it, right? Well, the save is currently at 238 hours and 23 minutes. Let's see how long it takes to add a couple walls and lights. Welcome back to my black and blue monstrosity to make one nuclear pasta per minute. The save is currently at 242 hours and 22 minutes. Let me take you on a little tour. All of the ore is turned on and right next to the factory, so it's going to be really easy just to delete this and have it sent in and get that concrete started. Same thing on this side, I just needed 3 sinks for the ore, and then I can just squeeze those 2 radio control units onto any of them. And here's the front of the factory. So I've got 2 entrances, one here down at the ground level, and then there's also a hypertube. If I zoom into the train station, I added a second row because it was just going to be too crowded to add a third hypertube to that first one, and I've got plenty of space. So now there's a second walkway, and I've got one hypertube there. And then I could just slap it on top of the belt highway I already made for the aluminum casing, and have it plug into that same level. Instead of trying to squeeze the elevator onto the inside, I decided to try to make it a feature out here on the outside. I'm using the small metal pillars and then some label signs. Now the tricky part with this is that's not normally where they go. So if I delete one, normally when you spin it this way, it would snap right there. And if I were to snap it in that kind of same spot, even if I hold control and nudge, these things are a half a meter themselves. Thankfully with signs, you can get them to snap at the end point here, and so I can basically do a 1/4 meter nudge. And there's definitely some cool things you can do with that. And so using that trick, that's how I got them in the exact spot that I wanted. And I used that in a few places because normally that would have been clipped halfway in, like they are for the windows. With the windows, I didn't mind them being clipped halfway through, but in other parts, I wanted the full sign. So let's go ahead and head on in from the entrance down here. And down here, there's not a whole lot. The large majority of my factories have the power ran on the ceiling because I kept each floor low enough to where I didn't think that it looked bad. But every once in a while, I just feel like running the power underneath and just trying to make the factory look really clean without wires hanging from the ceiling. So that's what I did with this one. Does this drive you nuts to anybody else? This elevator level is at the exact height as this floor. But you always kind of catch on the floor, like it just slows you down. Like you can run out of the elevator smooth, but running into it, you always stop and just kind of like slowly climb up it. It's very nitpicky and not a big issue at all, but I do wish that it was just a little bit more level. Up to the foundries. The lighting will change depending on which floor, and that's because of where I needed to run some of the belts and the lifts and whatnot. So with some of the floors, I just ran a single strip, which may even be a little bit intense. Maybe I should have done every other one, but with the coated concrete, it just looks so cool. Don't worry about that wire. That's going to the sink outside. That'll get deleted. But as you can tell, that's where some of the power connections are. And then I just hid them by placing a 1 meter foundation so that I could try to keep it as clean as possible looking. I don't normally like doing this because if I need to work on anything or there's an issue, I need to unplug something and plug it back in or whatever, then you just start having to delete parts of your factory just to access those parts that you've hidden. But you can make your factory look really clean by doing stuff like that too. So it's kind of a toss-up. With the smelters, the ceiling is pretty much the same. Same thing on the constructor's floor, because most of the lifts were all on this side, so I could still just keep it running right down the middle. Once we get up to the assembler floor, things started to change. So with this one, I did a little bit different. Each one of these takes up a half of foundation. 2 of them next to each other take up 1 full square. So that's the major change for up here. And then it was the same on this floor. And now we've made it to the top. I wanted to keep a similar style with the roof, and so that's where I added the lights for this floor. So I got to use lots of windows, and basically in each corner, I used lots of the outer corner extensions. So it does block a bit of the walkable path, but you can still get around here, and even though it's not a ton of space, I'm okay with it. But because there's not a ton of space, I didn't really want to add the railing, because then you're really limited on where you can go. For each floor, this is only 1 foundation, and so even if you did fall down here accidentally and you didn't have a jetpack or something, you can just get out of here pretty easily as long as you have blade runners. But great news for everybody using the hover pack. Someone recently commented on one of my videos, the issue with the hover pack and the power and light switches is fixed internally, which means next time we get a patch, hopefully, fingers crossed, we won't see that issue anymore. So when I see that show up in the patch notes, I am going to be very excited, and I'm definitely going to test it out and let you know. I could do the startup for this factory a couple different ways. This particle accelerator needs 2 things. The pressure conversion cubes are going to take much longer to produce than the copper powder is. So I could just not turn on the copper powder until pressure conversion cubes have showed up here. Or I could do what I did here and just add a smart splitter, because I already have a sink on this floor. I'll just sink copper powder for the 5 or 10 minutes it takes for pressure conversion cubes to be made and show up, and then I'll just delete the smart splitter and send in the copper powder, and then I'll get to see that glorious glowy ball. I used a tad more signs than I normally do on factories, and so to make things easier, because there's still no Zoopina signs, which I'm still crossing my fingers that one day we'll get, because for things like this it would have made it so much easier. I did the first 2 window sections manually, and it just took forever, and I just did not want to do that for every floor for all 4 sides. So I came up with a blueprint. This right here, let's just go place one. It has basically 2 sets of the windows. It already has my 4 meter label signs on here, and this right here is where the foundations are for the floor. And so I wanted to create something repeatable, and when I measured this out, these bottom floors are 12 foundations. The skinnier section is 9 foundations. And then the other 2 sides are both going to be 6 foundations wide. So I figured if I could make something that was a 3 foundation pattern, it would be really easy to just place all over this thing. I used some more of the small metal pillars to create this little thing in the middle and give myself a spot to place these 2 square signs. And then this would be the next floor windows with the signs already placed. So by placing these, that meant that I only had this middle window and then the label signs on the sides to place. And the reason I didn't include more windows is because once I got up to this floor, then there's a bigger gap. Instead of 1 window, there's 3 windows here in the middle, but it's really easy just to zoop those windows across. I just wanted to get the bulk of the annoying stuff to place out of the way. And if I had to do all of this manually, I probably wouldn't have added this middle section. It probably would have been just the windows and the signs. Kind of like this one, which I mean doesn't look bad, but I also really like the way this one looks. And without these beams, it just looked a little bit plain, and so that's why I added those. And it matches with this tower really well. I'm just using the blue instead of the gold. In previous saves, I used blueprints for probably too much. They are really handy, and especially if you're going to scale things up, they're really useful. And that was usually my excuse. It was the scale I was at, it just made sense. But I've been really enjoying building these, smaller factories where a lot of these recipes only need 1 or 2 machines. So unless I really want to dress things up or do things differently like I did my home factory where I wanted to elevate all of the machines, there hasn't been a huge need for me to make a bunch of blueprints for all of the machines anyways. Using them for the aesthetics like this, super helpful, saves you a ton of time. Figure out a decent design, and then you can spend a little bit more time on it, and then it just becomes so much easier. Unless you're going for the asymmetrical look, and then maybe you don't want blueprints. It's my favorite time, getting to watch this thing come to life. I'm going to start with the limestone, because that ends up getting reduced down to 72 concrete, and some of those belts are kind of long. Then I'll delete the smart splitters and the sinks down here to get all of the ore and the radio control units sent in. Once the heavy modular frames are being made, then I'll come out here and delete this sink so I can get the aluminum sent in, and then that'll kick on the fused modular frames. One nuclear pasta coming up. Now that the concrete has made a little bit of progress, let's go ahead and queue up all of this and delete it all at once. There's the first 3 heavy modular frames. Now that they've made their way just about to the blender, let's go ahead and send in the aluminum casing. And for that, I'm just going to delete a window, because I think from here I can reach everything. There we go. There's the first pressure conversion cube. And now that it's showed up in the particle accelerator, we can get the last part going. Just need to dismantle this and this. Yep, still need the merger though. Oh, and there it is. Beautiful. I love these endgame machines. I'm coming up on 5,000 hours played in Satisfactory, and I still have this silly childhood grin whenever I get to see my first particle accelerator of a save startup. Ah, it's just so cool and satisfying. I love it. And the path is so long for the pasta that I think there's pretty much always going to be at least 1, if not 2, on the belt. And that makes me happy. So that is the first of 4 of the space elevator parts for this phase, automated, and since I only need 100, this is going to be finished in no time. But as you can probably tell by the video not being over, I'm not quite done yet. I can actually pretty easily put together 1 more space elevator part today. The factory's up and running at 100% and has been for a little while now. I noticed my train station was missing something, so I gave myself a little side project to work on, and that way I could let this run for a while and then check on it again, make sure there wasn't any lingering issues. It's definitely not a big project, but I realized that I didn't have a way of getting up or down in my train station here, besides using a jetpack or a hoverpack. Or running along the rails? That seems like a bad idea. I added the elevator and a few more catwalks, and then I can just expand it when I add more train stations up here. Still got over 600 aluminum ingots here, 1,250 copper ingots, and then another 400 aluminum ingots over here. So this train station's probably going to get a little bit busier still. Before I hop in my train to go to the next factory, let's talk about this next project. As we can see in the top right, I've got 4 space elevator parts to automate. I just took care of the very last one. We go into the codex here, we should be able to see most of them. The thermal propulsion rockets are probably the most complicated. Probably going to leave that one to last. I haven't unlocked all of the milestones, and so I actually don't have access to the magnetic field generator quite yet. But the very first one on the list, the one I need 500 of, is the assembly director system. Only one recipe, so one machine at 100%. These are what it requires. One of the really cool things about the codex is I can actually play around with these 2 fields. So if I change this to 0.5 per minute, to produce 0.5, it would need 1 adaptive control unit per minute and 0.5 supercomputers. So you can probably see where this is going. I'm going to jump in my train and head over to the electronics factory. Time to add another lift to the wall. And we're back to the electronics floor. As we can see on this side of the factory, I've still got a bit of room to play with. And this manufacturer right here is outputting 1 supercomputer per minute. Looking good. Let's take a look at its storage. Well, that's just what I wanted to see. So even though I'm only making 1 a minute, I've completely filled up my dimensional depot and 1 small storage container. I really just don't see myself going through that many supercomputers. I'm going to place 1 assembler over here. Can set it for the assembly director system, and yeah, we're just going to underclock it. It's going to make a whopping 0.5 per minute. I'm not going to connect this yet, but it's going to be pretty easy. I'll just add a splitter there. Once I get the other part over here, I just need to add a belt, and that's the 0.5 per minute. And obviously, if we do some quick math, this is going to take a long time to get my 500. 16, almost 17 hours. But I have 2 other space elevator parts to build, and something tells me this is probably still going to finish in time. And I've always got the option to just cut that time in half by throwing the summer sloop in there, which I may do. Alright, so I think I want the storage container for these to just be right here. And then this one, I'm going to move over. We definitely want to put a smart splitter down in front. So that'll go into there, and that'll go into there. It's going to take so long for this to back up that I really don't think I have anything to worry about, but it feels weird not to place it just in case. So we'll put down the overflow, and this should line up right with that belt. We head over here. It's the belt that's collecting everything and heading on into the sink. So I'm just going to delete this section. Throw a merger in there. And reconnect it all. So now I just need to grab that adaptive control unit. 1 is exactly how many I'm currently making. Taking a look at the map, and thanks to the handy cartograph mod, I can zoom in over here on the rocky desert, and I believe it's this factory right here is making my 1 adaptive control unit. It shouldn't be too hard to just add another belt, send it over the train station. So let's go down to this train station and see what we've got to work with. Right now I just have the 3 train stations. The first one's mine. The second one I think is all being used, and I don't know if there's a whole lot of space. That's coming from 1 place. The copper sheets are going to be at the same train station, so I could technically use this freight platform. But if I look at the second train station, this one is also bringing in copper sheets because it was going to be way easier to bring in 10 by themselves instead of messing with that load balancer. This 118 is getting split, I think, into 2, if not 3 different places already. And so if I decided to add more copper sheets that were going to go to a different process, I would have to redo all of those ratio splits. And I just didn't want to. But now I have a freight platform that's really not getting used much. So let's go ahead and just add on another sign so I know. This is going to be the adaptive control unit 1, and it's going towards the assembly director system. So let's just cut a hole in the floor. So I'm gonna have to rework things just a little bit, because now what I need is this to plug into a smart splitter first. So I can tell the copper sheets to go here and the ACU to go into a second container that I'll probably just use this space right here. So let me show you how I'm gonna deal with it. Thankfully, we can now just place mergers and splitters right on the ceiling, which is, oh, so great. I love it. So we're gonna face it this way. All right, so from the train, it's gonna plug right into there. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch this because we can now. So the mounts we're dealing with, Mark 1 is still way more than I need. Easier if I just point myself in the same direction as the splitter. So straight ahead will be the copper sheets, and then to the right will be the adaptive control unit. All right, so for this, I should be able to... There we go. So that's the copper sheets going into that container. And then for the adaptive control units, I'm going to have it face this way. And then I'm going to go ahead and just use a priority merger. And yeah, I think there should be enough space. Unfortunately, this is going to be kind of long, so going this way isn't going to work. We're going to want to go this way. Those will plug in here. So for the priority merger, this is the one coming from the train, but I actually want the other one to have the higher priority, because this one is going to be where it ends up getting looped back. I really could use a small one, but I'm just going to use a big one anyways. And here's the diagram. Since I have to work with a Mark 1 belt, I'm going to need to split that 59 and cycle that back, and that will leave me with my 1. Is this ridiculous? Yes. Yes, it is. But it's really not that hard either. So let's go with 3 splitters in a row. 1, 2, and 3. And then a merger and 2 splitters. And then I just need 4 more mergers. The first one will be right here. We skip the one that's next to that merger. And then I just need 3 in a row here. And because this very first belt is going to be Mark 1, all of the rest of these get to be Mark 1. So we've got 60, and that's going to go into a splitter. We split this 3 ways, so there's 20, there's 20, and for the last 20, we're just going to use old stubby here. Get 2 lifts on either side. And there's the last 20. With this 20, we're going to split it in half. So there's 10, and there's 10. 5 and 5. That 5 went into a merger. And from here, we're just doing the old 5-way split. So that 5 is going to end up turning into 6 because we're going to split that 6 in half. So there would be 3 and there would be 3. And with one of these, we loop it back to that merger. And now we can group up all the rest of these because that's 1. Here's my 1 that's going to go off into the factory. There's 1 plus 3, so here's 4. Plus 5 is 9. Plus 10 is 19. Plus 20 and 20. Here's my 59. And that goes right into the side of the priority merger. And the easiest way to make sure that this never has any issues is I can just upgrade this belt. And that's how I take a Mark 1 belt and just siphon off 1. If I had decided to do this the other way around and ship the supercomputers out to the Rocky Desert, it would be this exact same setup. I would just need 1 more splitter in the front, and then that would split the 1 down to a half, and that is the only change I would have to make. Now I'm just going to have to add a belt and head on this way. And this will just go next in line, right next to the silica. What I'm going to do now is just delete this belt, so I can go over to the Rocky Desert and get that put on the train so that it can start to build up here. The train that runs between here and the Rocky Desert actually only runs like once every 30 minutes because it waits in the Rocky Desert for 20, and I think the round trip is almost exactly 10 minutes. So I will see you over at that train station. Back in the Rocky Desert, just in time to see this train loading its new cargo, and then sit here for 20 minutes. Alright, so first things first, before I forget, let's go ahead and add another sign. Sign is in place. Now let's move on to really what's probably the most important thing to change. And that is at the train. And this is actually where having it wait here for so long is kind of nice. So I almost always know where to find it. So I need to go to edit timetable. Plastic and rubber, that's not going to change. But I do need to edit both of these because I have the special instructions under both. I need to add item to the side that's doing the copper sheet, because this is also now going to be doing the adaptive control unit. And then here at the Rocky Desert 1, I need to add the adaptive control unit. And we can save that, save changes, and now I'm ready to be able to load that onto the train, and it should be able to pick up and drop it off where it's supposed to. So let's just go upstairs, and this is where my copper sheets are getting loaded in. Normally I would slap the merger down here because that just kind of makes sense, but I think this time, because they're both kind of coming from this direction, probably add it a little bit closer over there. Because these 10 are coming from here, but what I can do is, will it still snap? Perfect. So I can just snap a merger here. And I think I'm just going to use this belt space right here. I can just add another wall hole. Add another sign. Make sure it's facing the right direction. This will be my one adaptive control unit. And then it can come this way. And then from here, we should be able to fit this in all lined up. That'll meet up with the line of copper sheets and then head off into the train. So now just one last part. I just need to complete this. Thankfully, I think this is, yep, just one normal lift height. Just need one of these blueprints here. Repaint that. And then from here, this height is far enough that I'm pretty sure I need the floor hole up there. And now I've got the lift in place. And if we head up to the top floor, we can take a look at what's going on. There used to be a merger here, and I just merged the ACU onto here because I was just syncing them all. But now, this just goes on its own little journey. And as we can see, my storage is completely full on heavy modular frames and fused modular frames already. And I'm just syncing most of them. So far, 1 a minute for both has been plenty. The real test comes in the next phase, but I'm confident it'll be fine. The adaptive control unit just heads on over here. And that's where it heads down on that lift and then into the train station. Now the adaptive control units are headed onto the train. Because this train runs so infrequently, it's gonna be a little bit until I can turn on that new space elevator part. But that's okay, I haven't played with my new toy enough yet. And I think there's still a number of things up here in the Red Forest because I've only really been working in one half of it so far. The other half, I really haven't done too much exploring, so there should be a good amount of summer sloops. Probably need to make a little pit stop here. Refuel. As I was saying, there's a number of Mercer Spheres, summer sloops, and probably still hard drives that I haven't gotten over here. And can you really have enough alien remains? I do like the easy ones. So I'm just going to run around for probably 30 minutes to an hour and just kind of see what I can collect. Alright, well that's fun. Because I'm only moving 1 a minute, I don't really have to worry about the buffer getting too full and me taking too long on this trip. I'm going to continue to run around and collect some goodies, and then I'll see you back at the electronics factory. It's kind of nice that you fire so many bullets that it's like a little shield for the little spitballs. That's cool. Welcome back to the electronics factory. I gathered a few more remains. I have all of the upgrades done, and I've still got 25 Mercer Spheres to play with. I think I may have to try to use a few more of those in the next video. And I've got a total of 24 more summer sloops. Eventually, I'm probably going to want to collect all of those. But this has been running for quite a while now, so let's go ahead and plug this in and watch it come to life. The adaptive control unit is almost here, so let's go ahead and send in the supercomputer. And there's the first of 500 of those assembly director systems I need. I have a feeling once I get to the next phase, I'm gonna need more than 0.5 per minute. But for phase 4, I think it's gonna be fine. Even though this is gonna take a long time to finish the 500, these late game factories take me kind of a while to build, so I think I'll be okay. But like I mentioned, I could always throw the summer sloops in there. And that is gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for being here. And a special thank you to those that like, comment, and even share the videos. It really does help the channel, so thank you very much. I was able to knock out 2 out of the 4 space elevator parts. I've got 1 nuclear pasta per minute and 0.5 assembly director systems. I know, these aren't very impressive numbers, but I would much rather keep things on the simpler side until the very end. I promise I'll scale things up to more than 1 per minute. 2 down, that means I have 2 to go. The magnetic field generators and the thermal propulsion rockets. The thermal propulsion rockets are definitely one of the most complicated parts in the game, but thankfully I did plan a little bit ahead for it, and it really shouldn't be too bad to put together. So look forward to that, and thanks for watching.